In light of it being a rather slow week of news in the church, at least about things I care to report and comment on, because I'm getting really tired of commenting about perverse priests and the like, I'm going to launch a new series over the course of the next several weeks or months. That series will be on the new religion of the world, and this video will be an introduction of sorts to that topic. This is a topic many Christians of all stripes and allegiances have commented on, and the new religion of the world is multifaceted, comprising a great many errors that have led to our modern world of sin and death. To that end, I'm going to make a request of you. If there are topics you'd like to see covered in this series that are relevant, put them in the comments of this video. I won't be able to take all suggestions, and suggestions from patrons of this channel via Subscribestar and Patreon will be given more consideration, but in the end I'll use my judgment on how to incorporate those suggestions, if at all. Some of the topics I'll cover is the rise of politics as a religion, consumerism, materialism, scientism, activism, and numerous other topics. Sacred cows of the world will be slaughtered. Essentially, this will be a series on idolatry, and a form of idolatry that we've all fallen into to some degree ourselves. Father Ripperger, in his series on how the world is seen by Our Lady, speaks bluntly about how modernism is so pervasive that we will all fall into it to some degree unless we receive an extraordinary grace from God. It has been my contention that to some degree we are all modernists, and that one of our tasks in this life is to live the authentic Catholic faith. The first task of living that authentic life of faith is to shake off the shackles of modernism. This goes above and beyond our opinions on which form of the liturgy to attend on Sundays, for plenty of modernists said the traditional Latin Mass and the Eastern liturgies of the Church, and quite frankly, plenty still do. This is about what we believe. This series of topics, will be about what we truly worship. I'm going to define idolatry for you. The most simplest definition is that divine worship of something due only to God, given instead to something else. That definition is lacking, however, for it would make it seem that idolatry only covers things we overtly worship. No one, at least no sane person, worships their car, their sports team, pornography, or anything else of the material world. No one today in the civilized world is crafting golden idols and worshipping them as gods, but the charge of idolatry is one that we as Catholics are familiar with, for our Protestant neighbors have redefined worship to include anything that doesn't fit their man-made ideas of religion. We often get accused of worshiping Mary, so-called dead saints, images, statues, rosary beads, bread, or whatever has entered the Joel Osteen and Martin Luther-addled brains of our neighbors. We know this isn't true, but the idea of idolatry is one we're familiar with as a consequence. But like the charges of being idolaters from our Protestant neighbors, we won't want to hear the charge I'm going to bring, and that is that to some degree we've all fallen for modernism. It's not really my charge, actually, but one made by Father Ripperger, as I stated already. But the religion of the world is pervasive. It infects every aspect of our lives. Some become aware of it and fall for the snake oil peddled by those calling for a Benedict option, which is fraught with its own problems that don't square with the Catholic faith and practice. Others fall into despair. Still, others will laugh off what I'm going to say, which is that we've all bought into the religion of the world because the world is sick with the fruits of Masonry. It is their regime we live under, and we live under the yoke of their religion, a secularized religion that places absolute trust in both anti-Catholic institutions and in the individual, who is the prime mover in society now, or so we're led to believe. This view of man is anathema to the Catholic mind, as is evident by the various papal encyclicals I've published on this channel. And while I won't pretend to have all the answers, I can tell you where the antidote to this religion can be found. That place is in the traditional Catholic faith, the faith taught by the popes and by the Church before the madness of the 1960s went into full effect. That is where the antidote can be found. But first we must understand what it is we're dealing with. The problem of the religion of the world is at least in part a problem of liberalism and its little rebellious brother, socialism. By liberalism, I don't mean what American so-called conservatives mean, which is anything that isn't Republican. The American conservatives have done a good job of conserving nothing and have really only accomplished one thing, which is redefining liberalism and conservatism into nonsensical terms that mean literally nothing anymore. By liberal, I mean the traditional meaning of it, and that is anyone on the political spectrum, basically from Barry Goldwater and Ronald Reagan on one end to Joe Biden and Bill Clinton on the other. The vast majority of Republicans are liberals, and roughly half of Democrats are as well. This sounds alien to most Americans because they associate it with very specific policy positions, but liberalism is an ideology that places the experiences and needs of the individual at the center of reality. Individualism is condemned by the church, as is liberalism, frankly. For a good treatment of liberalism, I recommend reading or listening to my recording of Leo XIII's encyclical Libertas. When I recorded that encyclical, I received a fair amount of pushback because, as I said at the start, most of us haven't received the extraordinary grace to reject modernism in every aspect of our lives, myself included. And Libertas sounds like an assault on our personal senses and on our values. And in a way, it is, because the understanding of liberty and freedom at the core of the modern experience is antithetical to the Catholic faith. It lies at the heart of the new religion of the world. If you haven't heard Libertas yet, I put a link to my recording of it in the pinned comment of this video. If you're listening to this on one of the audio-only platforms like Spotify, simply email me and I'll send you a link to Libertas. Will this series be uncomfortable? Will it be challenging? I know it will be for me. Then again, I received a 1-2 punch in the past week or so when it comes to being personally challenged. First was when I recorded the homily by St. John Vianney for last Sunday, and the second was when I recorded Pius XI's landmark encyclical Quadragesimo Anno, which will go live this weekend on Saturday. It's long but challenging, because in that encyclical, socialism is utterly condemned by the church, and that's pretty easy for us to listen to. But so is virtually all forms of capitalism that we're familiar with, while capitalism itself as an idea isn't condemned. That may sound confusing, but the argument goes like this. Capitalism and the disparities in freedom and wealth that seem to accompany the various forms of it always lead to arguments for and movements that promote socialism. And Pius XI isn't exactly wrong with that, and he explains why. I'll let you listen to it for yourself. It is, again, a challenging encyclical. While I might call myself an ideological distributist, and distributism is not socialism, despite what numerous others may say on the matter, I thoroughly am attached to the fruits of a corporate capitalism and globalized economy that stands in stark opposition to the faith. I need to rid myself of these materialistic attachments that hinder my advancement in the spiritual life. You probably do too, let's be honest. So no, don't worry, this series I'm going to produce isn't going to be a love letter to distributism. Someday I may do a series on that topic, but it's sufficient to say that for now, at least, that is of such a low priority to me that it isn't all that relevant. Instead, what we'll be focused on is the false gospel of the religion of the world, which includes individualism, relativism, materialism, the primacy of the lived experience, and of course, politics and the law, the formalized religion of the West today. I say that these are examples of idolatry because their role in our lives has been so grossly distorted that we have elevated them to a religion. A case in point, when the court case that legalized fictional marriages were passed, many just said, well, of course there's nothing wrong with it, it's legal! As if that was an argument when the issue is of the natural law and morality. But in the minds of many, including the minds of many Christians, the secular law trumps the law of God. Here's another example. I saw this firsthand when some relatives of mine who are professed Christians said divorce and remarriage was okay because it was legal, an argument that completely disregards the words of our blessed Lord condemning the practice as adultery. But to say this marks one as an extremist, which is the secular version of being a heretic. Remember this. Liberalism was the hallmark of religion to it, including the accepted range of orthodoxy, and it has its own heretics and apostates. Today in the secular news, you'll hear stories of denouncing those who don't hold to the globalized false gospel as racial supremacists, a charge that is boring and overwhelmingly nonsensical. It is but one example of the secular religion denouncing its apostates and heretics, and there are numerous others. My point in all of this is that the religion of the world is something we must divorce ourselves of. Our Lord said that we are to be in the world, not of it. We are to be salt and light, and salt loses its flavor when it becomes lukewarm and of the world. This is a challenging message to hear and a challenging project I'm planning to undertake. So put in the comments of this video or comment on Patreon and Subscribestar what aspects I should consider reviewing in future installments. I haven't any idea how long the series will be, but it will be presented in the usual sized videos because I could do this in a long form video, but I don't really feel like producing a movie. And there will be plenty of room for ideas. So, again, thank you for listening and for being open-minded to being challenged on this topic. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.